Okay, hello, I'm Oz, Expert Sleepers, thank you for coming. I don't know what's going to happen now, it's up to you. Let's find out who knows what about anything so I know whether to start from the beginning or elsewhere.
Beginning, please.
Beginning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Beginning. Alright, that's good. So, beginning wise, we'll go back to where it all began, which was with the software, so we'll ignore my rack of modules for now. And we'll just start with a DC coupled audio interface, which this is a MOTU, that's my mouse, that's a MOTU Ultralite, which has got DC coupled outputs, so you can use it directly to generate CVs with no additional hardware. So you're going to do some patching for me. So
Absolutely.
Let's start with the absolute, because the first thing people usually try and dive into is the voice controller, which is kind of where you want to get to, but that, you know, if it doesn't work right away, it's not obvious why not. So we'll start with the absolutely simplest thing, which is Silent Way DC, which just chucks out a couple of CVs. And we'll use one of these leads. Talking about cables then, if you've read anything about this online, you'll have heard the mention of a floating ring cable. The outputs on these things are generally balanced. They're DC coupled, which is great, but if you stick a mono socket in the back, you're shorting out one of the two balanced outputs, which is at the very least going to make the thing hot and is generally not recommended, and MOTU themselves certainly don't recommend it. So this is a cable that I make and sell. You can make your own, they're very easy. It's just a TRS cable on this end and a mono cable on that end, and the ring is not connected to anything. So when you plug that into the interface, you get the ground connection, you get the tip connection for your CV, and you leave that floating so you're not hurting anything inside the interface. And then that is just conveniently 3.5mm for the Eurorack format, because that's what we all love. If you are not a Eurorack user, if you have an old monosynth, that you can just stick a 3.5mm to 1/4 inch adapter on the end of that.
Yeah.
And that works fine. And while I'm on film and I'm on a mission, I will say there's no such thing as an 1/8 inch plug. They're 3.5mm. Okay? I hate that. They're not 1/8 inch. So what will we do? Let's stick that into an output. Which are the outputs on this thing?
Yeah.
These ones. There we go. Right. Can you put that into something with pitch,
Yep.
please? And fade up the thing. There we go. Okay, so if I've connected this correctly and I wiggle this knob, that pitch should go up and down. So there you go. That's basically all you need. You can do what you like now because you can program that. So if you're testing this out, if you don't know if your audio interface is DC coupled or AC coupled, if you do that, then that pitch won't hold steady. It'll go back to where it was. So this is good because it's holding the pitch, so it's DC coupled, so we're in business. So now we've verified that, we can go back to what most people want to start with. Oh no, well let's while we're doing real basics, let's talk about another thing. The Silent Way LFO is another plugin in the suite. So that works. But this, I just mentioned, this is not the way to test if your interface is DC coupled or not, because that will pretty much work with an AC coupled interface as well, because of course the LFO signal is not DC, unless it's really, really slow. So LFO, fun to play with, but not a tested DC coupledness. So now we'll talk about the voice controller. So this is kind of the heart of the system for a lot of people. This is essentially replacing what a Midi to CV converter would do for you, but of course there's no Midi leaving the system. It's all in software, and what you're getting out of the computer is the control voltages. So there's a lot of stuff here on the interface, but all we'll use for now is a pitch CV and a gate, which is that's your classic monosynth thing that you plug into your sequential Pro 1 or what have you. So there it is. I've loaded that up on a Midi track in live. If I enable the Midi and set the outputs correctly, then triggering a note you see is giving you a signal on the right output, which is the gate. It's not giving you any pitch yet because it doesn't know how to do it yet because we haven't calibrated it, which I'll come to. Have you got an envelope generator hooked in as well? Okay, so can I give you another cable for the gate?
Yeah, so we just go into maths, which is just AD, so...
Yeah.
And then maths, at the moment it's just the DPO is going through the Optimix, so I'll control the level of that with maths, so when we get a trigger there...
Of course we've got no sustain.
No, I don't have an ADSR.
Okay.
But if we did, the note would be
did.
held when the note's here.
But yeah, so that's me triggering the note with the gate from there. In a minute I'll use one of the software envelopes and then we will have sustain.
Yeah.
Which would be nice. So, like I say, at the moment I don't know if this is showing up in the video. We're just getting a single pitch. So, how do we make that work? We need to let the software understand what voltage it needs to send out to get the right pitch. On a hardware MIDI to CV converter, that's done in hardware and it's all kind of factory preset. But because the software is running with any old interface that you've bought, it has no idea what you've got or how it works. And because this isn't designed for CVs, it's not calibrated. Any given MOTU Ultralite, in fact, any output of any Ultralite will be different in terms of the voltage you get for a given output from the software. So the calibration process, basically, what we do.
How different, us just out of nerd interest?
Nerd interest. I don't know the Modular Ultralite specifically, but
Less than a volt, or
less than a volt, yeah. But you're probably talking, up to in the hundreds of 3 figures of millivolts.
yeah, okay.
So in terms of pitch, that's semitones. So you need to worry about that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take. Can I have the oscillator audio?
Yeah.
A copy of it, ideally, so we can hear it, or we can get some audio from the computer. Just for the benefit of the video, what's happening here at the moment is that all the audio is going straight into the mixer from the modular. What I normally do when I'm working is have the audio coming through the computer and then out. So why don't we plug that in?
Well, I can give you a copy of that.
Give me a copy of that? Okay. Can you give me...
square wave.
Can I have the sine wave?
Yeah,
Just
swap them over.
Sine wave usually works slightly better than the square wave.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's coming out of the VCO, raw, untainted VCO signal. If you're doing this with a monosynth, if you're doing it with the VCO, then just take a sine wave out of the VCO. If you're doing it through a monosynth, filter all the way up, wave shaping all off, all that, just turn everything off. You just want the purest signal you can get. I'm just going to stick this into an input of the interface and put it in that one. Now, another thing, if we're on basics, the inputs of these things are almost certainly not DC coupled, which doesn't matter for now because we're just using it for audio. But when it comes to getting CVs back through this way, then that's relevant. You can't just plug a CV into this and get the CV into the computer. Actually, do I know of anything? I don't know of any interfaces that have DC coupled inputs. But it doesn't matter because we're using this for audio. So, what are we doing? Okay, so we're going to make another track in live, which is going to be an audio track, and it's going to take the signal from the modular,
Nice and hot.
which is nice and hot, and we're going to route that to the voice controller input, and we're going to turn it on. There it is, and while we're at it, why don't we stick an oscilloscope on there, just so we've got something to see. Look at that. So that's what we've got coming out of the DPO, so that's a nice clean sine wave, so we like that, that's good. Now, like I say, normally if you were set up to hear the audio from live, then I would have another track which would just be routing the modular to the speakers so you could hear it, but we don't need to do that here because we've got it going through the mixer. There it is, nice and loud. Should I do this? No, I won't. Okay, so we've got the audio from the oscillator into the voice controller.
Sorry, Ben, you just pop the door, please.
Alright,
Hello.
expert sleepers.
That's us.
Yeah, come on in.
Join the throng. We're just about to press the calibrate button for the first time. Yeah.
You're on door duty, Ben, whatever you think.
Yeah, okay.
If it
So,
gets warm, let me know, maybe.
okay. So what's going to happen when I press the calibrate button is the voice controller is going to send out a series of voltages to the pitch of the oscillator, which is going to make it make different frequencies. The audio coming back into the software is going to listen to what frequency it gets, and then it can basically draw a graph of output versus frequency, which it will then interpolate to know how it can send the right pitch for any note. And it's going to, is the VCA still, oh well, we're going to need to, oh it doesn't matter, sorry.
I can jack that
Yeah,
out.
okay. It's also going to open the gate, so if you were using a monosynth it would open the gate fully so you could hear it, but since we've taken the signal straight from the
Well, I can just
oscillator,
take this out after calibrating.
okay.
So it
Yeah,
runs
well,
up and
we'd
down.
like to hear it, so if
Yeah.
you can just turn it up or, okay. Alright, I'm going to press the button now and start yammering on, so. Okay, so that's done that. Now, okay, can you just turn it down a wee bit?
Yeah.
So this is the graph we've got of the calibration. You can see it's starting kind of low and not actually getting very high. So I guess I can play it now. Can I? So it's,
Gate back in.
so there we go. Perfectly in tune oscillator. Now it's not getting terribly high. We've got a range of, well, it's an ultralight. In theory, we'd get about 6 or 7 octaves out of that. It's got a range of about plus or minus 3.5 volts.
Which is great with a DPO. If I use a Midi TV converter, I only get maybe 3 octaves or something before it starts slipping. So
Really? Okay, that's good to know. So anyway, it's not going terribly high, but it's going nice and low. If we wanted to recalibrate and get some slightly higher notes, then
I'd change the frequency here.
just tweak the,
Yeah.
just twiddle the knob on there. Well, that's, yeah. Okay, that's probably as high as we would need, probably. So if we just recalibrate that now. Okay, so now it's kind of centered our 6-7 octave range in the middle. So it's not going as low now, of course, but you know,
I probably went up a bit too high there.
that's fine. But just to prove the point, if you end up with a calibration that doesn't cover the range you want and you haven't got any more voltage to draw on, you just twiddle the tune knob on the oscillator and recalibrate it, and you get that thing. So yeah, that's basically how to get started. Now you can obviously program a sequence now in Live's Midi editor, and it'll play it, and it'll all be in tune and in time, because as this is all coming through an audio-based system, everything is sample accurate. There's no USB latency or jitter or anything like that. So this is where it all gets fun. Now, I mentioned the envelopes. I'll just whiz through a couple more features of the voice controller.
Yeah.
And what we'd really like is some sustain on the sound. So let's just repurpose this lead, which was the calibration audio.
Yeah, that's it.
So I'll chuck that out of there. And can I just replace the VCA with that?
Yeah, so that's going into Optimix.
Yeah. Okay. Now the voice controller as a plugin has 6 outputs, and they're kind of mixed from this matrix of signals that each one can possibly represent. By default, the 6 outputs are a pitch CV, a gate, 3 envelopes, a trigger signal, which is like a pulse at the start of a gate, which you would use as a kind of re-triggering flexibility for monosynths. So like when you play a legato line, you can either trigger every note or not. There's a velocity signal, and there's the final knob on there is a smooth, which I'll show you that in a minute. So the envelopes by default are on outputs 3, 4 and 5. So to get at those in Live, we make another track. We take the input from the voice controller, we ask it for outputs 3 and 4, we set the output to the next outputs on the interface, and we turn that on. Now if I do this, it's doing it, it's giving you a signal. Have I given you the wrong one?
3, and you're coming out 5 and 6.
I
Oh,
thought it was.
it's definitely out
Did I
3.
not plug it? Yeah,
Oh,
this
just-
doesn't feel like it's plugged in properly.
Is this the envelope output here, 5 and 6?
Yeah,
Okay, so, but you're in the 3 there.
I know, but that's another thing about MOTUs. The outputs are off by 2.
They're off, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same.
So this is actually 3, 4, and 5.
Right.
Why are we not getting any signal?
I don't know, are we definitely the right one?
You haven't got the super handy O tool, have you? Just to check if you're getting a signal out of that. Could be a duff cable, of course.
You should get a pulse here at least.
No.
No.
All right. Well,
We'll try a different
why is
cable.
that not working? All right. Let's just try the other one. So that was the one that was the gate.
Yeah.
No, it's not the cable. What have we
No.
done?
Oh, are we getting? Yeah.
Oh, there we go. All right. Well, that's odd. I wonder what was going on just now. Oh, is that working as a linear or an exponential VCA?
It's a low pass gate.
So past 8.
Yeah.
Could be. It's all right. So it could just be that it was really quiet before. So the envelopes. Yeah. Okay. So that's. There we go. That's an envelope. This is kind of a simple ADSR interface, and there's another interface to each one, which gives you more breakpoints in the signal. It's kind of 2-stage release, and so that one can work as a delay on the attack.
Complex envelopes.
Complex envelopes, but most people just use the. Well, I don't know if they do actually. They've never told me, but I usually use the ADSR
Yeah.
because it's nice and easy. So now we've got a signal we can actually sustain. We can try the things like I've got a pitch LFO on here, which is nice if you don't happen to have an LFO handy. There's different re-trigger modes. If I give it no attack for a moment. So this is all the classic monosynth re-trigger mode. So that's lowest mode. So you're getting the lowest note, it's got highest as well. Portamento as well. Fingered or automatic.
Funky.
All the stuff you'd expect from a MIDI to TV conversion system. Like I say, we've got velocity as well. I'm not even quite remember if that's velocity sensitive or not. Probably isn't it?
What's a quick question?
Sure.
What's the correlation of these 3 envelopes to those 6 outputs again?
Those are by default. Those are on outputs 3, 4, and 5.
Right. So is that one going to the pitch?
No, that one at the moment is just going to the VCA.
So the amplitude.
Oh,
we
right,
don't have
okay.
we don't have a VCA. We don't have a envelope going to pitch at the moment.
Right,
We
okay.
could do. I mean, we could route the cable out, or we could just do it virtually actually, because if we send in live those envelopes to the pitch, actually we don't even need to do that. That's an excellent talk about the output matrix. So if we wanted, say, envelope 2 on the pitch, then we'd look for output 1, which is going to the pitch, and we'd dial up a little bit of envelope 2.
Cool.
Like that. Yeah, so all of these things can be mixed. Some of them are less useful in combination than others, but yes, if you've got a pitch envelope, you can easily put that on there like that. Where to go from here? This also supports polyphony. I'm not sure we can. Maybe that's something for later on if anybody wants to see me sweat while we patch up a polyphonic modular patch. It can certainly be done with this, and it works pretty easily. I don't know, how many VCOs have you got kicking about?
Well, if you want to try that thing later on, I could whack in more. I've got. Yeah.
No, I've got my cases
Four here.
to it, which has got.
But if we wanted to do that with braids, I could whack in another 3.
Yeah, let's do that later.
Yeah.
When we're short of things to talk about. So that's the voice controller. Let's just whiz through a few other things in the suite of plugins before we get onto hardware.
Yep.
Okay. So I've talked about. Sorry, I'm waiting. For the sake of argument, let's just go through them alphabetically, because otherwise I'll have to make a decision about how we talk about them. So the next one is the Silent Way AC encoder, which is nothing to look at. Now this is what you use if you've got AC coupled outputs that you want to use directly. This will basically take the CV that you're trying to send out, encode it via amplitude modulation on a very high frequency carrier, which you then decode somehow in hardware. Now I haven't had any for years, but I made a module which did that, called the ES1, and you can also DIY some cables. Basically, if you just get a cable much like that, but combine it with a diode and a capacitor, you can make a little rectifier which rectifies the AC signal back to DC. You can actually get pretty good control over things just from that bog standard interface, not DC coupled, the AC encoder and a diode capacitor pair, if you're into that sort of thing. Since then, that's all that kind of mucking about in hyperspace has been replaced by the modules, which, you know, and the digital ones, especially the ES3 and the ES4 and the ES40, to have a digital connection from the audio interface to the modules rather than going through a modulated AC output. But anyway, that one's there.
Can I ask, do you know anywhere that does those cables? Because I'm trying really hard not to buy another sound card. So
Yes.
if I can use my old rubbish one for another 6 months, but just buy a few cables and
You
get the CV.
Well, the ES1 modules are still available. I think the only place that has them left is Analog Cable in the States.
Okay.
Nobody sells the cables pre-built, and the reason for that is that the exact combination of diode and capacitor that works best depends very strongly on what you're plugging it into.
Okay.
So it will be down to what audio interface you have and what you're trying to control with it that you just need to tinker.
All right.
It's such a simple thing. You can build it. I've built it. Wonderful. Is there an internet? Do we have internets?
On
No?
this computer, which isn't plugged in, I could get you a password.
Oh, don't worry. Well, let's have a break later and get the internet running,
Yeah,
and then
okay.
we'll get. I won't bring my iPhoto up because it'll no doubt start on something that you don't need to see. But yeah, you can basically unscrew a TRS 1/4" jack plug and solder the bits on it, and it'll work. It works fine. It's really easy if you've got a soldering iron, and if you don't, then you should. Everybody needs a soldering iron. Preachy bit number 2. Anyway, AC encoder on from that. Good fun. Happy days. Okay, next one alphabetically. I'm not going to do this alphabetically, actually. That was a terrible. We've done Silent Way DC, which was handy just to test stuff. It's also a kind of a basic utility for CV in a way, in that it does just generate a constant signal. But if you combine that with with automation and live, or with a Midi fader box, then you've got instant control to CV in the simplest possible way. Which was quite handy, and it also has ways of scaling and combining things going into it. So if you just need a plug-in that just fades stuff up or down, it's actually quite useful for that. But it's not the most glamorous. Skipping down a bit, Silent Way LFO I plugged in briefly. We've got a filter. We have a filter.
Yeah.
Pretty good. This point, I have another lead.
It's running as well.
I'm sure this lead is working.
Right.
Right.
So filter cut off?
Yeah. Is that like in a flash? Or
No.
no. Because we're still not sure this cable's working. Let's just
it's crap. It was good.
Get a brand new one. Yeah.
So,
Cut off.
Yeah.
Which one?
It's,
That one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Why don't I just there we go. Where's the LFO gone? There it is. Okay, so the Silent Way LFO is kind of an all singing or dancing LFO, really. Go up to your audio rate, it's got all the basic waveforms you'd expect. It's got random noise, and you can combine these in any combination you like, really. So.
Cool.
And then, as well as the pulse width on the square waves, there's an asymmetry on the whole thing, so you can kind of, it's kind of easier to visualise with a sine wave actually. Which is kind of fun. Move the whole thing up and down. Now the joy of this being in software, of course, is it's in the DAW, so it's tempo syncable in a really useful way. And this is where I wish I'd had some audio coming out. See, I guess I've got. Not even going to get that, are you? I've got no way of making a sound that's going to prove to you that this is. Hang on.
We jacked in.
Let me just crack one of these cables out.
Yeah.
There we go. That's not very exciting. What have we got here? There we go. Okay, so if we put this into tempo sync mode, what do we need?
multiple waveforms, just mixing
Just
them
mixing them,
together.
yeah. So, yeah. Does it matter in line if it clips there? No. In fact, it probably will. So there you go, tempo sync LFOs. So that's super handy to have for lots of reasons. Yeah, I'm a particular fan of what do I like to do? Let's do that. I love that. I could listen to that for hours. And this is a good time to talk about the Silent Way Quantizer. Actually, let's just go with that. So we're on the LFO. before you go mental. So the SolidWave Quantizer is a fairly versatile quantizer module. So that's a quantizer takes your continuous CV and chops it up into discrete steps. Now it will do that in a very basic way. Which is just chopping the kind of -1 to 1 range into a number of steps that you just dial in, which is kind of fun. But what most people want from a quantizer is actually to quantize the pitches into a musical scale. So it does that too. If I load, I thought I had a button to do that automatically. Maybe I didn't. Okay, no I don't. Alright, this is backtracking a bit. The voice controller, which you'll remember has this magical calibration graph it's figured out, you can save that to disk. So I'll save that out there, calibration.txt, and then I'll load that back into the quantizer. Boom. Now I can enable calibrated mode, and you can see this kind of crazy little keyboard graphic here going very rapidly through a number of steps. Unfortunately it's going. So there you go, now it's that's quantized that to pitches. You can also choose a scale here with this scale button. So that's a C major scale.
You do modes with it as well, can you?
Sorry?
You do modes with it?
Yeah, it's got all the modes and pentatonics and stuff, and you can write your own scales through a little script if you want to do that sort of thing. So that's nice. So going back to our...
Can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
So could you make loads of weird noises on that, have it all come back in to live, and then quantized and out again?
Yes.
And none of it would be out of tune? It would all be...
Yeah, well if you route your... Yeah, you can route... I'll come on to how you get CVs back through in a minute, but if you put your CVs from the modular into this, then route them back out, then it is just being a quantizer module, as if you had a hardware quantizer module in the system, yeah.
Wow.
So that's my favourite kind of random notes. Well, that was interesting. How did I do that? Didn't mean to do that. Interesting. So uncalibrated, calibrated. So that's all good fun. Moving on from that one. Next one in the list, which is often used in conjunction with the calibration, just turn those off for now, is this one, which is called the step LFO, which is kind of a hybrid of being an LFO in the traditional sense and a step sequencer in the kind of traditional analog row of knobs and you dial in a sequence kind of affair. So I use this myself a lot just as a sequence. So I actually very rarely use the voice controller with a MIDI sequence. I usually just play around with this. So is this? Have you still got gates?
Yeah, I think
Can we get back?
somehow
We
increase the velocity and that's getting a constant tone.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. Let's just do that. Can I just?
Got
No,
gates
that's
right
fine.
now. So there's your next track. It's done. Just repeat to fade, and this is all. I mean, like I say. Sorry, there's so much. So in a kind of LFO, let's just turn that on. It's tempo synced. It doesn't have to be. It can just go at some random speed, and it doesn't have to be steps as well. It can be. And so in this mode, it's a kind of curve that you can draw with the mouse, and it doesn't have to be that long. It can be much shorter. It can be much longer. want like an LFO curve you can draw, you've got that. But the kind of canonical use is tempo state. It's great fun. What else to say about that? Oh yeah, I guess now might be a good time to talk about smoothing. Most of the plugins have like a smooth parameter as the final thing, which basically applies a slew limit to the thing. So if I stick that on the let's just what are we actually hearing? It's because we've got such a harsh gate going. So what we're using there is the what would normally be a gate is being used as the envelope. Can you stick it back into it? Stick it back into the. I was doing the envelope, the maths.
Yeah.
So get some slightly softer envelopes there you go.
Good partial, right?
What am I actually trying to show you?
It's smooth. Where have we gone?
Is it? What am I trying to actually do? Sorry, I'm having a brain melt here.
That's okay. Very serious there, Russ.
Sounds like me.
Okay, I
Well,
can't figure that out. But
Nice and warm in there anyway.
Is that?
plenty warm.
It's not too bad.
Okay, alright, moving on then.
Yeah.
This has also got a kind of hidden feature which it acquired quite recently, which is a software implementation of a very popular module called the Turing machine, which itself is kind of a riff on the noise ring, which is itself a riff on some old Buchla thing probably. So it's got a kind of a random element to it. So if I just turn this on, you'll kind of see what it's doing. So it's, at the moment, it's just completely randomising the pitches. But the joy of this random system is it's got a controllable degree of randomness, including going up to locking it. So if you, I mean, you can go and explore this at your leisure. But yeah, so this randomness thing is all the way up, which means it's locked to that pattern. If I knock it back a little bit, it'll change it subtly every now and again.
And you can do the same thing with this row, yeah?
Yep, if you want. Though you tend to end up with a lot of
Dead buzz.
gaps.
Yeah.
I find that tends to work less well.
Yeah.
But anyway, as a way of generating random things, it's quite nice. Random, slowly evolving things as well. At some point it's going to randomly evolve.
Yeah.
So I find that great fun to just leave running during a set or something and have a pattern that, and then if you like something, you can always just stop, turn the randomness off, and then you're back into, oh, I
like that, but I wish it did that. So that's the step elephant. Now at the moment, although it actually sounds to me quite nice, that's just throwing out random pitches. But if we combine that with the Quantizer again, turn the Quantizer on, which is just inserted after it as a plugin in live, then we are now getting
Scale.
yes, pentatonic major. That's right. Still not getting the result from smooth, I expect. It's probably just because the way we've got it patched up.
Yeah, blame Simon.
Yeah. Anyway. Lots of fun. Moving on from that one. We still got our filter patched in?
Yeah.
What did I put on the filter? I don't even know what I've... Is that even still plugged into anything?
I don't know. Into output 5.
Yeah. Oh, let's not worry about that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one that we thought... Oh, of course we're not doing that anymore. Alright, let's continue our parade through the plugins. Okay. We can probably just stop that now. Give our ears a rest. The next one here, I'm not sure we have a terribly realistic thing to do with it right now, but it's one of the most useful to a lot of people. Is Silent Waste Sync is a little plugin for chucking out clocks, which are of course tempo synced with the audio workstation. It can put out clocks at any rate you like, to, you know, if you want to clock your modular sequencer, or can also, if you send out 24 or 48 pulses a quarter note, then what you end up with is DIN sync basically. So you can plug the output of that straight into an 808 or a 606 or a 303 and run the sequencer. And because it's from the audio system, it is sample accurate, jitter-free, and all that stuff that you like. So that's a super handy plugin for clocking. Do we have? Should we clock the relay just for larks?
Yeah. Or
How much of a pain is that set up?
no, it's easy peasy. Someone take out your 1 volt per octave. Just use relay instead.
Yeah. Just to say we've done it.
And then what are we going to clock in with?
Oh, let's.
Just disconnected one of the cables.
Yeah. Well, they're all going to go eventually, aren't they? Let's try that one. What's that one? 5.
Yeah.
So in my world, that's 7.
It's weird that.
It is weird, that, isn't it?
Yeah, we're getting clocks.
Well, there you go.
There's that. There.
I've got my little drum loop going just for the sake of having tempo.
Oh. Can you speed the rate up of this?
Yep, so at the moment that's 1 pulse per quarter note.
Pretty accurate.
Yeah, well actually this drum loop is probably not the best thing to be demoing because it's a crappy drum loop and it's flamming all over the place, it's not even in time. Actually Live's metronome would be the thing to use, which is loud.
You can drag in one of the drum kits, the pre-done ones.
Can you?
Yeah, there's like a 606 something in there. Yeah, kit.
Into where?
If you actually go to clips,
Right.
that's the one, and then drag in any of those.
Into where?
Just into a
Oh,
new
just into a
empty
track.
space. Yeah.
Shows how I use live, don't they? Are these not full of feel and stuff?
Well, you can dial that back. But
Wow, that takes me back. Yeah. So that's synced anyway.
That sounds pretty synced.
That's proves the edge point. That's a terrible, terrible drum loop, which I will never use. But thanks for pointing that out. I never use clips in live. I just record stuff on the fly.
there's like an 808 one that's pretty simple in there, I think.
Is there?
Yeah, and it's 707.
Cool. Yeah, that was Silent Way sync. Silent Way trigger. I won't set anything up with this, but it is handy to have sometimes. So basically, this is like one envelope generator from the voice controller that responds to Midi, and it also does respond to CV. But this is typically useful if you've say got and it only responds to one Midi note, which you can program. So if you've say got some analog drums or something, and you just want a hit when you hit a Midi note, then that will do it for you. And it's quite a simple way. And what have I asked? Also, I guess another thing I've used that for, if you're using the step LFO as a sequencer and all you've got is a gate, and you don't want to use a hardware envelope generator, then you can patch the CV from the step LFO, you can patch the gate into the input of that, and then that will give you an envelope. So you've got like a software envelope synced to that software sequencer.
It's good for a reset as well, isn't it? For
Yes, there's also that
which
special
you can
case.
time with sync, can't you? 'Cause that's what I've done on my trigger right now.
Yes, yes.
Just that one.
There's a feature I need to add to sync. At the moment, sync gives you, as well as the clock, it gives you a run-stop signal, which is what you need for DIN sync. But some things, like, well, I guess a lot of analog sequences, really, and trigger right, for example, and the old Lin drum, they don't need a run-stop signal. They need a trigger. They need a reset pulse at the beginning rather than a signal. And I need to add that to the sync plugin. I haven't done that yet, but you can do that just with the trigger thing by send it a little MIDI clip from live when you want to start it playing, and it will do the reset for you. So that's handy. Voice control we've talked about. That's not a Silent Way plugin. We won't talk about that. Silent Way Soundplane. I brought my Soundplane.
I want to look.
I don't propose to plug it in. You'll love it. 'Cause it's made
I've
of
seen
wood.
it.
Oh, you've
Seen it.
Yeah, you
Wait
saw
for
it
it,
last
didn't I?
year.
Done it right.
I'll get this out last year. Not last year. I'll get this up there later if anybody's interested.
It's the
But
only time I've ever touched another man's wood, I can tell you.
this is an instrument made by a company called Madrona Labs,
Absolutely.
and it's basically a multi-touch controller, but it's made of wood and it's not capacitive multi-touch. It's force multi-touch. So you don't have to play it with your fingers. You can roll a ball around on there or hit it with a stick, and it's made of wood, and it couples with it's got a USB socket, and it couples with a program that decodes the USB into MIDI or OSC, and part of Silent Way is this plugin which communicates with that over OSC and gives you pitch CV calibrated through the voice controller, and it basically gives you kind of you can have many of these, like one per touch, and then you have multi-touch pitch and X and Y and force voltages that you can patch into the modular, which is kind of fun. But it's lovely to play because it's.
Is that one piece of wood, Andrew, right across, or are they individual? This part, are they individual or?
Yeah, I believe they are. Well, obviously they've been cut from one piece of wood, but I think they're individual things, and it's kind of, you can see it's got like guitar frets on it. So it's designed, the basic way to play this is to pretend that either that this is pitch and this is something else, or there's like a guitar-like mode where you've got rows tuned in fourths relative to each other. But it's actually a continuous surface, the sensing surface. It's just got these things on it to help you kind of get a grasp of it. I'll plug that in later if anyone's interested, but that's what that plugin does. But it is a lovely thing.
It looks awesome. Yeah.
How much
As
is
I
that?
was saying, you spend ages just watching the computer screen as well because it's got this like, is it the spectrum
Oh, yeah.
thing? So when you press it, it's like
Like a
all,
3D graph thing.
it's absolutely mesmerising. Awesome.
We'll do that later.
What's the price of it, Oz?
I think it's $1895.
Oh, that's less than I thought.
So
And then you have import charges.
then you've got shipping and import duties. Yeah, but yeah, thing of beauty. Soundplane, won't talk about that. Okay, Silent Way Learner.
Yeah, no.
I won't go too deeply into this. So, Silent Way has as of version 2, has kind of auto-mappable Midi and OSC control of all its parameters via this plugin called the Learner. So basically, what you do is fader box here somewhere. This is super handy, by the way. Not that. This. Fader Fox, really small, lots of features. Let's jump it small because I haven't got any space on my desk now. I'm going to do away with this keyboard. That's interesting. Why did that? Oh, I unplugged the audio interface. Sorry,
That's okay.
didn't need to do that. Okay, so what I got? Is that doing anything at all? Let me just see if this has come up. I need to restart live. Got no audio. Got no audio at all. That's because that's turned off. Sorry. Yeah, pulling that out was the wrong thing to do. You know, live is throwing a bit of a spaz, so I'm going to restart it. It didn't like me unplugging the audio cable and the MIDI controller at the same time. Okay, now I've got my thing, so can I mean, this basic test, can I... There it is. So in live, obviously, you've got very convenient MIDI mapping of stuff anyway, using live's own mapping. But sometimes that's not what you want to do, and in other hosts you haven't got quite such convenient MIDI mapping. So I've lost track of what we've got plugged in anymore.
Yeah.
Do we still have something that would work usefully with the?
We can unplug everything and start again.
No, let's just slap the step LFO in because I just think that's the most instant gratification. Blah. Yeah, that's my entirety of my musical skill right there. Draw a random line. But I forget what we have covered now. We've got pitch. One of these should be pitch.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we were using the relay, weren't we? Okay, we could have used it.
So which one is pitch? You know,
Pitch is
one of these two.
that one. Okay. Okay, but just, I mean, this isn't going to sound like anything, but Fader Fox, that's what I want. Okay. Okay, so now, so the learner, Silent Way Learner is part of Silent. Basically, it's the hub where all the MIDI and OSC kind of go through it as a routing system. So at the moment, it's just showing me what's coming in from the Fader Fox there. And then if I click a control in here, say I want to do the offset, say, on that, then the learner now says active parameter silent wave step LFO offset, and if I click learn and then wiggle that, then it's mapped them in now. That's MIDI control of that. So it just gives you an easy way to set up MIDI control of any aspect of silent wave. And like I say, it supports OSC as well. So it works with what are the things that have OSC? Lima, the Lima and the Touch OSC. So this isn't on the Wi-Fi network, but I don't know if you.
It's a mono as well.
I'm sure it would, but I don't have one. I don't know if you've seen Touch OSC. It's like you can create your own layouts of controls and map those to parameters. So people have done some fairly, I mean, if you scour Vimeo or YouTube, you'll find some quite complex layouts people have done with Lima or what have you to control a system of silent wave plugins. Sometimes to just kind of augment the computer, and so a lot of people have built these kind of hybrid systems where it's the computer is at the heart of it but hidden, connected through my stuff in the software to an iPad. So you just have like a whole layout of performance control, controlling your analog stuff from the iPad, and it all ties together quite nicely. But that's what that one is. Most of the rest of these are to do with the hardware. Silent wave follower, I don't have any way of demoing this. It's a pitch and envelope tracker. So it takes audio in, say from a, I don't know, guitar pickup or a...
How about voice?
Or a voice. What, you just...
Yeah. I'm thinking that'd be amazing. Because we talked about the
I think it'd be amazing too.
No,
I don't have a microphone here
You've
handy.
got a microphone on the laptop, but it'll pick up everything else.
Well, if we're all very quiet and dancing.
Oh, I can't see. There we go. Well, just for the sake of a demo, audio interface, audio input, built-in microphone. There we go. This will be a real test, won't it? Oh, okay. Now that's actually sending out a CV, so we don't want to do that. Let's just. Okay, so one of these is pitch, and one of these is. So it's extracting the pitch and the envelope basically from the signal. And I don't know where the microphone is on this. Hello! God, that really stupid on the video, isn't it?
Anybody else?
Is this actually on? Hello, is this thing working?
You said that the envelope does pitch as well, pitch following all.
Yes.
It's a very high quality microphone.
So we've got lead, right?
Yeah.
We live this stuff,
Oh God,
and we're
back
just
here.
floating about on the.
This is going to not work.
Soldering.
I've got my bag.
I've got one buried back here.
Stress yours and I can bring my bag.
Get a red band on. Yeah.
I'm just going like that. I know like the terminologies.
There we go. Cool. This is done out because you found some delay.
Okay. Just going to do one here in the front.
Starts dropping
Yeah.
into VCs and all that, and I'm like, I don't know, is that last week?
Yeah.
Switch on the.
That's what you would have been
There we
doing.
go, that's better.
The old stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
CVs and all that.
Okay.
Mainly,
Can we then that pitch
driving
tracks?
into it.
Could we run that straight into nothing?
In theory, yeah, but you'll definitely want to take the envelope as well, because otherwise you'll just get random noise when you Yeah, so at the moment that's chucking CV and gate out of these two.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's your pitch.
Okay. That's going in.
What was
your
One
sequence
more
on
proactive
how
here.
it's then?
Yeah, and that should be an envelope ideally now, not a just that should just be going to a VCA.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an actual
Midi
envelope now, not
Yeah.
triggering an envelope.
Yeah,
Okay.
No, and we came from
Same
the
for
Is
here.
there still something running in the
where
background?
we
When
were
it's
just
not
influenced
enabled.
by the main people.
Oh, right,
I mean,
that's right.
I've been in the studio with Charlie.
There you go.
Cooper.
Yeah, of course I do, yeah.
On the 303.
Now at the moment it's not calibrated but I can load the calibration from the voice controller in here.
Calibrate your voice.
So I calibrate the system so that when it
Like
figures out what
late
pitch I'm
90s.
singing, it can translate that into a CV. Of
Before
course,
that.
we've probably, we need to make that calibration again because we've changed everything since then, haven't we?
Oh, and you could even quantize your voice. Cool.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that's
Simon, my
so we need
guy,
I need a
one
VCO
of our best
back
mates,
into
his
the
brother's a guy who's run
Okay.
all the club at parties.
So
My
that's a
mate's
song
brother,
again.
Danny Gold.
yeah.
He's a mate.
Um,
This is what you were probably
so
like on the other side. He's a bit more commercial side, I think.
Mm.
That is the same sort of time.
Okay.
Yeah, we used to,
I've never-
we used to play, we used to
Um,
party.
Yeah. Ah, yeah. So that's when because he started it. His party's like
Actually, a couple
'94,
of
I think.
vocal
So
ranges would be well.
he would have done posted by then.
Yeah, we were
Um,
finished now, we
yeah.
were wrecked.
It's exactly as it was. Okay, so in theory. Yeah, anybody actually can sing?
Ben's got a lovely voice.
I really can't sing.
But I know for a fact this
On the
works
spot.
beautifully with my bass clarinet. It tracks it
Hey,
really nicely. Well, we could quantize that now. That'd be fun.
that would be cool. Is that all the pop stars do?
Scale? No, I'm just gonna. Making a fool of myself. But anyway, that's the idea.
Yeah, and
It's a pitch and envelope triangle. Yeah,
Good
with
for
a
running
slightly
drum
more
loops,
controlled.
I'd say.
Sorry?
I'd say it's good for running drum loops into it.
Yeah, I mean, you stick what you like into it. Does anybody beatbox? But yeah, as a way to get some kind of random control into your system, it's kind of fun. All right. Thanks for getting the mic.
You got noise. If we were going to break it in two, would now be a good time to do it?
Yeah, we all had a break while you were running to get
Oh,
the
okay,
mic.
yeah. I had a quick bag, so let's
Oh,
bring
well,
it
there you
up
go.
again.
I mean, we can take a little break in a bit. The only other thing I've got here, which is not directly relating to hardware, actually there are a couple, there's two or three, which I'll talk about briefly. CV input. As well, so I mentioned earlier that the inputs on these interfaces often aren't, and almost always aren't DC coupled. So if you want to get a CV from there back into HAR, then you need to do the dance with the modulation, demodulation through audio. So I've got this thing called the CV input plugin, which handles that. It's a bit tedious to set up, so we won't, because I've got a much easier way in the hardware. But either with a module I make called the ES2, which I don't have with me, or using this in conjunction with a VCA, you can get CVs here back into here, basically, as CVs. And I'll show you what you can do with CVs when I've actually got them running through the ES6, because it's much easier to do it that way. But just so you know, it's there. And then there's also the CV to Midi and CV to OSC plugins, which I'll show you once I've actually got the CV coming through. But yeah, like I say, just so you know, there is the possibility to get CVs in even if you don't have my hardware. And I think that's it for yeah, that's it for plugins that don't relate to the hardware. So that's me rabbited for an hour. Any questions at this point? I mean, generally shout out when you have questions, but that's most of what you can do just with the audio interface. So hardware-wise,